here. We'll kind of get the show on the road. So firstly, welcome everybody. Thank you very much for coming out tonight. My name is Matt Mulhern. I'm joined by my friend and colleague, Dan Bissick, who I'll throw it over to in a few. Let him introduce himself, say a few words. But like I said, my name is Matt. I've, college financial aid expert, college financial aid consultant. I've been working with families, helping families navigate the college financial aid process I just started basically the day after Labor Day, we consider the new season. Started my 13th, lucky number 13th, my 13th season of the college financial aid process. Have a really good feel, very well versed in, kind of all things college financial aid, the strategies to implement how different schools do business. And so hopefully tonight, by the time we're done, you also have a very good feel of how that entire process works. I'm going to throw it over to Dan. I'll take the reins back. I'll give you guys some logistical things. Yes, it's being recorded, all that good stuff. And then we'll get going. Dan, how we doing tonight?
Doing great, Matt. Thanks. So, folks, it's great to be with you this evening. I happen to live close to Cincinnati, Ohio, so we're mourning the loss of Pete Rose today. Anyway, great to be with you. My background, I was a financial planner for 25 years and have been in the college side of things now for 18. Joined CAP 3 years ago. Love working with families. I'm called a unicorn because I understand both the funding and the admission side of things, but super excited to be with you tonight to help Matt as we go through this important topic.
All right, awesome. Yeah, so Dan will be, great to have two of us tonight. He'll be answering your questions, so feel free to fire away. I guess I didn't say, I'm in Jersey City, New Jersey. Right, I think a little bit more local to most of you guys tonight. So that's a little bit about me, but enough about me. One thing before we get started that I really is important to me that I hope you all do. If you enjoy the webinar tonight, if you enjoy the presentation tonight, which undoubtedly you will, your guidance counselor at your high school or your vice principal or whoever it is that kind of runs the show on the college financial aid side, please make sure if you find value in this webinar that you go out of your way to shoot them an email, or next time you see them, just say thank you for setting this up, for arranging this. It goes a long way for those folks to know that their families are receiving value from this webinar. So big shout out to all the guidance counselors, vice principals, assistant principals that set this up and arranged it to make sure that you guys, their families, their communities are, put themselves in the best position to navigate this college process, right? Last thing, logistics, right? The all-important logistics. So number one, yes, this is being recorded. This is being recorded as long as you registered, and obviously if you're here live with us tonight, you registered. But if you have to cut out early, right? Hopefully the Mets are up 6-1 at some point. We all celebrate. But if you have to cut out early, or whatever the case may be, as long as you register for the webinar tonight, you will receive an email tomorrow with the recording. That way you can listen to Dan and I on the treadmill for the next week, right? Because what's better, what's more entertaining to pass the time on a treadmill than my voice, right? No, but you will get the recording. Like I said, Dan's going to be in the background. He's going to take all your question and answers. Guys, we can't be that specific in terms of individual family questions. If you do have some individual family circumstances that you want to discuss with Dan or myself, we're going to give you the opportunity to do that. It's not going to be tonight, but we're going to provide you with a link to schedule a free 20-minute complimentary consultation, and we'll tell you a little bit more about that as we go forward. Also, if you can keep your questions to the slide that we're talking about, that would help Dan out a lot as well. We're going to cover all the greatest hits, 529s, multiple kids in college, divorces, right? We will get to all these topics, trust me. If you keep your questions to the slide at hand, that would be tremendous as well. And the last thing, listen, guys, have fun. I understand, I appreciate that this is a very serious, important topic for everyone here. But this webinar tonight, hopefully you already got kind of the gist, is going to be lighthearted. The good news is, we have 3 hours, right? So we have 3 hours to get through all this, to cover all this. Yeah, right. No, we're not doing 3 hours. Not even close. I'm going to tell you, it's going to be an hour. It's going to be an hour 15, right? Honestly, it might be an hour 20. Depends on how many story times I go into. But we're going to be short and sweet. Time flies when you're having fun. You guys are going to learn a ton. So with that, let's last thing. I probably will definitely forget, I got to toggle different screens between the PowerPoint, some other stuff I'm going to show you. I probably will forget to switch back to screen. I've done it every single time, despite reminding myself to not do it. Guys, use the emojis, right? For if you think something's funny, whatever, thumbs up, use the emojis. But super important here, if I forget to toggle the screen, it's the only time you're allowed to use a thumbs down emoji, right? That's it. Don't use a thumbs down otherwise. But if I'm talking about something and you don't see it on the screen, give me the thumbs down. That way I can see it. Dan's going to be busy answering questions and I don't see the comments. So that's my, super brainstorm for today. There you go. Thumbs up. I like it. Good start. So feel free. Fire away with the emojis. And the only thumbs down allowed is if I forget to toggle the screen. All right. With that, let's get the show on the road here. All right. Where do we begin? I stink with these screens. From the current slide, beginning slide, all the slides. So guys, we work with a company called College Aid Pro, right? And our mission here, help end the student loan crisis by empowering families to shop smarter for college. Look, like I said, I've been doing this forever. The most complicated, the biggest problem when it comes to college financial aid and navigating this process successfully is a lack of understanding, right? Or there's just a lack of information, or as I like to say, a lack of accurate information when it comes to the college financial aid process, right? So listen, this webinar tonight is not going to be about singularly how do you submit the FAFSA. We're going to cover that. We're going to touch on that, but that's not really what I want you to get out of it. When you walk away tonight, when we're done here, I want you to have a much better understanding of how the process actually works, right? How do these colleges award money? I want you to understand, because until you understand how the process works, you cannot begin to position yourself in the best way possible to maximize grants and scholarships, right? So I want you to have a really good understanding. And how we're going to do that is basically in 3 parts, right? So the first part is what I call kind of the understanding of how financial aid works. It's kind of our base layer, right? The inside. How does it actually work, right? Then we're going to build on that, and then I'm going to give you some strategies, right? And now that we have an understanding of how it works, what strategies can we implement specifically for the class of 25 as we approach these financial aid applications? What strategies can we implement to actually save ourselves money, right? How do we put ourselves in the best position to maximize the amount of aid we receive? And then the last piece of the puzzle, what I call kind of the nuts and bolts, is how do you actually do it, right? How do you actually, what are the websites, how do you actually submit these financial aid apps, right? But again, much kind of deeper, much kind of higher level of how the process works. That's really what we want you to understand, because again, once you start to understand how it works, then you start to become an educated consumer, right? And ideally, we want to help you avoid, becoming another statistic in the, $1 trillion student loan crisis in this country, right? So that was fun. I told you we we're going to have fun tonight, right? No, but seriously, understand the process, right? Understand how it works. Your presenters, Dan, didn't make the cut in the picture. Sorry, buddy.
That's all right, man. They've already seen me anyway,
So that's me. That's a few years ago, but hopefully I'm aging all right. Those are our emails. If you have any specific questions, feel free to reach out. But that's us. All right. Before we kind of get into it here, so look, this process, very stressful, quite naturally, a lot of stress, a lot of anxiety when it comes to college financial aid, right? And again, why that exists is it's going to exist naturally. We're talking about, your kids and your money, right? 2 of the most important sensitive topics that there are. And even more so, why is that stress levels, those anxiety levels heightened? Because no one understands this thing, right? No one understands how the process actually works, right? So again, this slide here is going to kind of start our foundational path to start understanding how does financial aid actually work, right? So this is kind of our step 1, our basics. What is financial aid, right? Financial aid is singularly a discount on the sticker price, right? A discount on the sticker price. You have the big scary sticker price, that's COA, room board cost of attendance, right? Some schools, 70, 80, 90, Columbia, $100,000 sticker price, right? So financial aid is a discount on that sticker price. There's 3 different types of financial aid. There's need-based aid, there's merit-based aid, there's self-help aid, right? Self-help aid, we're going to talk about, which is loans, work study, right? Self-help aid, we're going to talk about the least tonight. Why? Because self-help aid is, as I like to say, the least helpful, right? Trust me when I tell you there is a time and a place to, dive into the loan portion of the program, right? It is not now. It is not tonight. The easiest way to pay for anything is get the cost down as much as you can, right? Then you figure out, what's your best strategy to pay for. So self-help aid, loans, work study does exist. We're not going to touch on that much tonight. Our focus is on the other two pools of money, the free money, right? The stuff that's actually going to reduce our cost, need-based financial aid and merit-based scholarships, right? So these two are kind of opposites to some degree. Merit-based scholarships is kind of intuitive. Everyone kind of gets, everyone kind of understands. Merit-based scholarships are solely about the student's profile, right? Usually their academic profile, but it could be athletic, music, art, etc. A merit-based scholarship given by the admissions office is solely about the student, has nothing to do with the parent's financial situation, right? So a merit-based scholarship, all about the student. Again, that's kind of intuitive. Everyone kind of gets that. Everyone kind of understands that. The one caveat I always like to point out when it comes to merit-based scholarships is that not every school offers merit-based scholarships, right? Like the Ivy Leagues, for example, Harvard, Princeton, Yale, Brown, UPenn. You can't get a merit scholarship to one of those schools. They don't exist, right? But assuming, the school does offer merit scholarships, your son, daughter, child applies to a school, school says, we like this kid, we're going to offer them a financial incentive to come to our school, right? A merit-based scholarship. Again, we all kind of get that. We understand that. The other pool of money that exists is what they call need-based financial aid, right? And so while we kind of, intuitively understand merit-based aid, no one understands need-based financial aid and how it works. So hopefully tonight, in the next 3 or 4 slides here, you're going to have a much better understanding of how it does. So need-based financial aid is really not about the student at all. It's about your family's financial situation, right? It's all about the family's financial profile, income, assets, number of people in the household, okay? So we say, okay, that we get slide 1, financial aid, discount on sticker price, got it. Self-help aid, loans, work study, there's a place for that, but that's down the road. That's not actually going to reduce our costs. What we're focused on is merit-based aid and or need-based financial aid. Merit-based aid, we get it. It's based on the student's academics or athletics, their profile. But how about need-based aid, right? How do I know, one, if my family's going to qualify for need-based financial aid, and then 2, if we're going to qualify for need-based financial aid, how much, right? How much are we going to get? Okay. So this is the need-based financial aid slide. And so again, like I said, guys, I've been doing this a long time. I know there's plenty of guys in the audience tonight that I get to this need-based slide. I'm not going to get any need-based financial aid, right? You immediately dismiss it. Some of you might be right, in all honesty. Most of you probably aren't, right? And here's the reason why, right? Need-based financial aid is not binary. Right? Need-based financial aid is not binary. What does that mean? I don't know. I just made it up. No, here's what it means. It means that for 80% of families watching tonight, it's possible, if not likely, that at some colleges that your kid applies to, you will get $0 in need-based financial aid. But at other colleges your kid applies to, you will get tens of thousands of dollars in need-based financial aid, right? Guys, there's 3 variables to this process. There's the kid's academics, right, which we all kind of get, understand, or their athletics, whatever, the kid's profile. The second one is the family's finances, which we're going to dive into in a second. The third variable, which people don't understand or underestimate, is that each college is a different business, right? So which college are you applying to? What is their business? How do they do business, right? So keep that variable in mind that every college is a different business. So let's kind of break down this equation together. This being the need-based financial aid equation. Every school in the country uses the same equation to determine your family's eligibility for need-based financial aid at their school. They take the cost of attendance of the school, right? Whatever it is, 30, 50, 90, $100,000. That's the all-in price, room, board, tuition, fees, right? $100,000. They then subtract what's called your SAI, right? Your SAI. And listen, for anyone watching the Met game in the background, I'm not, right? I promise you I'm not. But anyone that's kind of not paying attention, lock in right here. If you walk away understanding, believing, knowing 2 things at the end of this webinar, obviously, number 1, yeah, no, I like that Matt and Dan guy. Yeah, he's pretty good looking, pretty funny. He was good right on that webinar. That's obviously number 1 thing I want you to walk away from. The second thing, this right here, the SAI, it is that important. If you don't understand anything else tonight, understand the importance of this SAI, right? The SAI is the Student Aid Index. The Student Aid Index, previously known, the artist previously known as EFC. They just changed the terminology. Distinction without a difference, right? So the student aid index is an actual dollar amount assigned to your family, right? That is basically the minimum amount a particular college thinks you can pay for school, right? That SAI number is vitally important to know and understand because at many, many schools, that sole number is going to dictate how much you pay for college, right? Very, very important, which we're going to spend a lot of time talking about in a second. So they take your the cost of attendance of the school, they subtract your family's SAI, student aid index, actual dollar amount assigned to your family. That equals your eligibility for need-based financial aid at a particular school, right? Now, just because you are eligible for need-based financial aid at a particular school does not mean that you are going to get that, right? Why? Because that third variable, every college is a different business, right? And they all do business differently. They all award money differently, right? So let me give you I'm going to kind of verbally give you an example, and I'm going to show you an example, right, of this need-based financial aid equation. So let's take Columbia, right? We'll start Columbia, obviously elite private school, New York City, Ivy League. Sticker price, all in cost of Columbia, $100,000, right? Crazy, unbelievable, $100,000 sticker price. Then we're going to talk about the Mulhern family, right? My family applying to college. The Mulhern family has an SAI, a student aid index of $30,000, right? So what does Columbia do? They say we cost $100,000. The Mulhern family's SAI is $30,000. 100 minus 30, the Mulhern family is eligible for $70,000 in grant money, right? Need-based financial aid. Kind of rhetorically, but how much do you think Columbia is going to give the Mulhern family in this instance? $70,000, right? They will meet 100% of need-based financial aid. Columbia will give the Mulhern family $70,000 in grant money, right? At Columbia, the sole determining factor of how much you pay is what is the family's SAI. It's the only thing that matters, right? You essentially pay exactly what your SAI is, right? So this $100,000 school for the Mulhern family is going to cost $30,000 per year. That's how it works, right? However, always a however, not every school does business that way, right? Let me give you the opposite end of the spectrum. Penn State, right? Penn State, we are, go Big Blue, right? Great, great, awesome school, great campus, you know, decent football team, overrated, honestly. But Penn State, they do business differently, right? So the Penn State out-of-state sticker costs $60,000, right? So Penn State says we cost 60. The Mulhern family's SAI student aid index, right, is again 30,000. So Penn State costs 60. The Mulhern family's SAI is 30. So at Penn State, the Mulhern family is eligible for $30,000 in need-based financial aid, right? How much is Penn State going to give them, right? We said Columbia is going to give the Mulhern family $70,000. How much is Penn State going to give them? If you guessed 0, you are correct, right? Penn State is not giving this family a dime, not a single dime, right? So even though my SAI is 30,000, Penn State's not giving me anything. I'm paying $60,000 a year. That's how it works. So going back to the initial statement, need-based financial aid isn't binary. At Columbia, the Mulhern family, and these are real, like this is how it works. I'm not making this up. The Mulhern family is getting $70,000 in grant money, right, per year, $70,000 at Columbia. At Penn State, they will get $0 in need-based aid, right? So again, need-based financial aid is not binary. So again, when you immediately say, I'm not getting need-based financial aid, 80% of you are both right and wrong, right? At some schools you will, and at other schools you won't, right? It's a very, this whole process, and I say this often, is a very family-specific process, right? What's the kid's academics and what is your SAI? Those are the family components. And then it's a very college or school-specific process. What schools are we talking about? How do those schools that you're interested in do business, right? So if we could start to understand those variables, namely how important our SAI is and how each individual school is a different business and does business differently, we can then start to understand and put ourselves in position to apply to colleges that will give our family money, right? So like I said, I've been doing this for about 13 years. When I first, this slide honestly really hasn't changed. It's pretty much the same thing. The only difference is this SAI used to be called EFC, but other than that, it's pretty much the same exact slide for the last 13 years. That's how, you know, it's all been operating. However, well, not however, but when you know, before COVID, all this was in person. God bless Zoom. But after I did this slide, right, I would get 2 questions normally, right? Number 1, Matt, Great slide. I'm starting to understand the college financial aid equation. Good. Number one, how do I figure out my SAI, right? My family, how do I figure it out, right? That's number one. And number two, how do I know how different colleges do business? How am I supposed to know, right? I'm a parent. I got, a job, a side hustle, two other kids. How am I supposed to know, right? And quite frankly, we didn't have a great answer for that question, right? Obviously, the answer is always hire me. Not really, but kind of. No, but yeah, I know this because this is what I do. Dan knows this because this is what we do, right? But how does the average person, figure this stuff out? Those two questions, quite frankly, is the impetus, the foundation for why we created the MyCap software, right? So when you register tonight, you got a link to create a MyCap account. It's completely free. Do it, don't do it, no pressure at all. But by creating the MyCap account, one, you can tonight figure out what is your SAI, right? Before you do anything else, before you submit a single financial aid application, you can figure out, what your SAI is. And then two, you can pick 3 colleges completely free. You can only pick 3. Don't pick Penn State because they're not giving you anything, right? You can't change them once you pick them. But you can pick 3 colleges completely free, and you can begin to start to understand before you apply to schools, how much are they actually going to cost, right? So let me give you an example here. And here's my first toggle. If I forget to go back to the PowerPoint, you guys know what to do. All right, this is the right one. Maybe, maybe not. Who knows? Let's give it a whirl. Of course, it's not the right one. So let's go to a different one. This is my weakness here, guys. Bear with me. There it is. So here we go, right? So this is the Mulhern family financial profile in the MyCap. And again, do it, don't, completely up to you. If you want to, you see the website, you can do it now, completely free. And what this shows you right now tonight, right, is what is this family? And listen, some of you might be saying, like, this hypothetical here of my family, this is a salary well into the 6 figures, right? This is not, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 income. This is an income well into the 6 figures, right? So what are we looking at? So the first thing is we want to look at what is our SAI? What is our student aid index? Cannot stress the importance of that enough. There's actually 2 different types, which I'm not going to get into right now. That's kind of getting into the weeds, but we have an understanding of what the SAIs look like. Then we start to look at different schools, right? So we look at NYU, right, which I'll replace with Columbia just because I was referencing Columbia. Sometimes I use NYU, but now we'll do Columbia, right? So Columbia, $100,000 sticker price, like I said. So Columbia takes that $100,000 sticker price. For this family, the $100,000 sticker price is, I'm not going to say meaningless, but doesn't matter, right? What matters much, much more is number one, what is their SAI, right? 24,000. And then how does that school do business, right? So for this family, right, Columbia, $100,000 sticker price, they subtract their SAI, 24,000. They're going to pay $27,000 a year at Columbia. That's how it works. This is what's going to happen, right? If you click on Columbia, you can see Columbia, like every other Ivy League school, does not give merit scholarships, right? But they give need-based financial aid. They be 100% of need-based aid. For this particular family, the Mulhern family, they are going to give them $72,000 in grant money, right? Need-based financial aid. That's how it works. So the importance of understanding this SAI, the importance of reducing the SAI as much as you can at these type schools cannot be understated. Penn State, I told you, right? Even though my SAI at Penn State is less than 30,000, 26,000, Penn State's not giving me a dime, right? Because it's not about your son or daughter. It's not about your finances. This is the third variable. It's about how Penn State does business. They don't give anything to anybody, right? So Penn State's going to cost this family sticker price. So in this scenario, and this is the rule, right? This is not the exception. The Columbia with the $100,000 sticker price, it's going to be $30,000 a year less than Penn State out of state. That's how it works, right? For this family, okay? And then you have a school like Syracuse, again, because sometimes I get, well, Columbia, okay, but, Columbia's whatever, a 7% admission rate. Syracuse, right? Obviously, listen, no pushover, but very good school. You don't need elite scores to get into Syracuse. They're still very generous with aid. Do they meet 100% like Columbia? No. But for this particular family, right, when we go and look, they're going to give them over $50,000 in grant money, right? Need-based financial aid, right? So very, very generous with need-based aid. Not quite as generous as Columbia, but still very generous nonetheless, right? So again, Three variables. What's the kid's academics? That's both from an admission perspective, and we'll talk about merit scholarships down the road, right? But the second variable, so for this family with an SAI in the teens, you don't need a merit scholarship. You got to apply to schools that give the most need-based financial aid, right? Now, not every family strategy is going to be that, but for this family, this Mulhern family with this financial profile, that's the best bang for their buck, right? So again, figuring this out is very, very helpful in terms of navigating and applying to schools that will give you the most money, right? So hopefully we're starting to understand how important the SAI is, how important figuring out what the SAI is for our family. And then we start to understand, okay, no matter what, and look at me toggling back, doing a good job, no matter what SAI, no matter what schools we're applying to, we want to make sure that our SAI is as low as possible, right? Now, let me just tell you this before we dive into the specifics here. The FAFSA serves one function and only one function. All the FAFSA does is assign your family an SAI. That's it. That's all it does, right? That's it. It gives your family an SAI. Then we have the CSS profile, which we're going to talk about in detail at the private schools. The private schools use that CSS profile to assign your family basically a private school SAI. They call it institutional SAI, but it's basically a private school SAI, right? So all the function of the financial aid applications is to allow individual colleges to assign your family an SAI, right? Okay. Dan, we all good with all that? Anything we need to kind of dive into before we get into the asset portion here?
Matt, you're doing awesome. Keep it up, buddy. I'm answering a ton of questions.
All right. Love the encouragement. All right. I guess I'm doing great with the toggling, so I don't need any thumbs down emojis. Look at me go. All right, here we go. So what do we need to know about our SAI? So right here, guys, this screen, we're going to only talk about assets. The next slide, we're going to talk about income, right? But right here, we're only talking about assets, right? So don't ask Dan any income questions yet, or whatever, ask him. So what do we want to know about our SAI as far as assets are concerned? So now we're getting to the strategy portion of the program, right? So firstly, the first thing that you want to know when it comes to assets, and it's going to be different from income, when it comes to assets are valued the day of, right? Income's going to be different, but assets are valued when you sit down to fill out your financial aid application, and some of you might have already gave a crack at the CSS. Hopefully you didn't submit it yet before seeing the webinar. But when you sit down in the month of October to fill out your CSS, that's how you report your assets, right? They're reported in real time day of. So that's the first piece. Second piece, here we're going to talk lowest hanging fruit, parent assets versus student assets. So honestly, I don't know, maybe I've been doing this too long. This is pretty straightforward that people kind of don't grasp or don't pick up. So stay with me here. So parent assets versus student assets. So ideally, right? Ideally, when you sit down to fill out the financial aid apps, you do not have any assets in the student's name, right? You don't have any assets in the student's name. Why? Because student assets are factored into your SAI at a much higher percentage than parent assets. In other words, if your kid has $20,000 in a savings account and you report that as a student asset, that will increase your SAI much more than if you reported that $20,000 as a parent asset, right? Now, most times people are like, oh, I got to move money around. Most times you don't. Why? Because the kid is usually under 18 when the account was opened. As long as your name and social was on that account as a parent, it is your asset as a parent. It is not a student asset, right? So you could report student assets as zero, and you put that $20,000 as a parent asset, right? And again, that helps you. Why? Because parent assets are factored in at a much lower percentage than student assets, right? When they put together the SAI, okay? Now, 529s every single year. I get, people reach out to me in March, in April, and May and say, Matt, we didn't get as much money as we thought. Can you review our financial aid applications and see what we did wrong? And listen, this isn't to scare anyone, but every single year this happens, right? Number one, they didn't watch my webinar. No, but so what do they do wrong? 529s, right? Again, this is low-hanging fruit. This is easy. 529s, and I'll ask you, maybe rhetorically, maybe not. If you want to answer, feel free. If you don't, that's fine. Are 529s a parent asset or a student asset? Which one? We're not going to do the Jeopardy theme song because it's going to take too long. I'm just going to tell you 529s, every single one of them by rule, parent assets, right? A 529 is a parent asset. The student's a beneficiary, but it gets reported as a parent asset, right? I can't tell you how many times I've seen this after the fact, right? Family does a great job, saves whatever, 20, 50, 100, more in a 529, tremendous job, awesome. And they incorrectly report that 529 as a student asset on the financial aid apps. Not only are they, one, filling out the applications wrong, two, they are inadvertently driving up their own SAI, right? Because like I told you, that student asset is going to be factored in at a much higher percentage than the parent asset, right? And listen, there's not there's not many guarantees I can make when it comes to the college financial aid process, you know, especially to a room full of people. But here's one I will absolutely make to every single one of you. If you report the 529 as a student asset, there's not there's not a single school in the country that's going to call you up and say, "Oh, Mulhern family, we were reviewing your CSS profile. Yeah, that $100,000 that you reported as a student asset, is that a 529? Oh, it is. Yeah. Oh, that should actually be a parent asset. We're going to move that for you and actually give you, you know, $10,000 more dollars, which it might be more, honestly. It'd probably work out to be about $12,000 or $13,000 more, legitimately. Yeah, that's not going to happen, right? Will not happen. So up to you to know what goes where. So again, 529s by rule, parent assets. Grandparent 529s. They used to have a grandparent 529 rule on the federal level. They got rid of it. Long story short, you have a 529 in grandma, grandpa's name. Great. Keep it there. It does not get reported. It's grandma, grandpa's asset. It's not your asset as a parent, right? So that's, if it's there, it's perfect. Leave it. It basically takes it off the table. UTMAs and UGMAs, right? If you don't know what it is, then don't worry about it. You don't have one. If you do have one, unfortunately, I do have bad news for you. An UTMA or an UGMA is considered a student asset. It is. It's unfortunate because it's going to drive your SAI through the roof if you have a significant amount in there. You know, there might be some strategies you could implement to at least mitigate that. You got to sell capital gains. There's no one size fits all. If you're in that position, you know, give Dan or reach out to Dan or myself. We might be able to help you out. But UGMAs are a student asset, not ideal for this process. They will, unlike 529, significantly increase your SAI because they are student assets, right? So again, just quick summation, 529s are by rule parent assets. Ideally, you don't want any student assets. UTMAs, UGMAs by rule, unfortunately, are student assets. All right. So moving over, what's an asset, right? When we talk about an asset, what are we actually talking about? And we're going to talk about real estate down in the right corner there. I'm not talking about real estate yet. Basically anything liquid, except, this is the everything but rule, right? They consider everything liquid an asset for financial aid purposes, except, right, except your retirement account. 401k, 403b, Roth IRA, 457. Any kind of retirement account is off the table for financial aid purposes, which usually is music to people's ears. So that's usually a good thing. Now, again, quick story. Told you a little story time, but to kind of drive this point home, about 4 years ago, I had twins reach out to me, right? Their dad was a cop, their mom was a teacher. One daughter went to Penn State. This mistake actually didn't hurt them at Penn State because Penn State wasn't giving them anything anyway. But the other daughter went to Boston University, right? Difficult school to get into, you know, $80,000 a year at the time, but they meet 100% of need-based financial aid. However, this girl got in, the award came back, you're getting $0 from Boston University, right? The dad reached out to me after, what are we doing? What happened? I looked under the investments, right? They reported they had, I forget the number, $800,000 in investments, right? I said, what is this investment number? $700,000. So that's our pension. I said, well, we found our problem, right? That didn't take long. They basically said, mom was a cop, mom was a teacher, dad was a cop. They said, combined, we got about $800,000 in the pension. They put that number down, not understanding. They didn't see my webinar. That retirement accounts don't get reported. But Boston University didn't say, oh, well, maybe it's retirement. No, they sent them award, $0. I got involved after the fact. We had to appeal. This is a retirement account, and no exaggeration. They should have got 40. Had they done it right initially, they would have got 40,000. I got involved after the fact. We got them, I think, 23 or 24,000, which obviously is better than zero. But for all 4 years, the school never made up that difference, right? So they left, do that math, right? Whatever, 15, 17 times 4. They left a ton of money on the table by making that singular mistake. Guys, I'm not trying to scare anybody, but this is the reality of what happens when people do these forms. There's a lot of money at stake, right? You want to make sure that you do them right. Is debt considered, right? Is debt considered? Short answer, no, right? Any consumer debt, credit card debt, not going to be considered by any school in the country. Unfortunately, and I get it, living here, New York, New Jersey, your cost of living, not, schools, I know Tulane says, yeah, we take that into account. Nonsense. They might adjust the SAI. I'm not exaggerating, like $1,000. So if you had a $40,000 SAI, maybe they lower it to 39 because you live in New York. It's an inconsequential difference. So the cost of living stuff, I get it. It's not fair. I'm with you. I live in Jersey City, right? The most expensive rent in the country. I get it. Unfortunately, it doesn't matter. So, if you're going to go to a school with any of that kind of stuff, no one's going to listen to that. However, there are some circumstances. If you've ever filled out a financial aid application, there's very little room for context or explanation. It's just numbers, right? So if you have some mitigating circumstance that you want a school to be aware of, it's on you to go back to the school, right? And say, listen, here's our story, right? They may listen, they may not, but if you don't tell them, they definitely won't. Special needs child, care for an elderly parent, right? These are things, significant unreimbursed medical expenses, right? Quick story, had a kid at Michigan a couple years ago. Mom had cancer, unfortunately it was terminal, huge. And this is really the, kind of highlight how these schools are businesses. So a kid goes to Michigan, mom had terminal cancer. So the kid gets into Michigan, we appeal, say mom has cancer. They increase the award by $12,000. It's crazy. The next year, maybe it was 2 years later, but unfortunately, mom eventually passed away. We get the award back. They took the $12,000 back, right? We went back to them and said, what happened? They said, well, you don't have any of the medical expenses anymore. True story. That happened a few years ago. So one, yes, significant medical expenses, schools will take into account, but these colleges are businesses, right? 100% businesses. Now, not every school is probably that, whatever word you want to use, but most of them probably are. So that's a true story. So is debt considered? Short answer, no. If you have any mitigating circumstances, on you to reach out to specific colleges, right? And let them know. Houses, real estate. So this one is always, complicated, wrong word, whatever. Here we go, right? So let me explain in the best way possible. So hopefully, Dan doesn't get overwhelmed with questions on real estate. So there's two main financial aid applications here, right? There's the FAFSA, which everyone's probably heard of in some form or fashion, right? On the FAFSA, your primary residence is irrelevant. They do not ask about your primary residence on the FAFSA. It does not matter, right? However, always a however, there's also a financial aid application called the CSS Profile. CSS Profile just became available today. The CSS Profile is used, or I should say required, by about 200 private schools in the country. They will ask about your house, right? The CSS Profile is a much more in-depth financial aid questionnaire. It's kind of a double-edged sword. Like a school like Columbia, they require the CSS Profile. A lot of those schools are a lot more generous, but they also kind of dive a little bit deeper into your finances, right? Or a lot deeper, honestly. So one of the differences between the FAFSA and CSS is home equity, right? So the CSS Profile is going to ask about your house. They're going to ask you 4 questions. What year you bought your house, how much you paid for it, right? And then the 2 key questions, how much is your house currently worth and how much do you owe on it, right? The difference between what your house is worth and how much you owe, right? That number is equity. Many of these CSS Profile schools take that equity and treat it as an asset the same as they treat cash or 529 or stocks, right? They treat it like any other asset. Increases your SAI significantly, potentially, right? And again, in this part of the country, that hurts a lot of families, right? That stinks. And I get it. So, it is what it is. How do we mitigate that to some degree? Well, I advise considering to use the IRS quick sale rule, right? So what is that? It's an actual line in the tax, and you can do this for any real estate, right? This is an actual line in the tax code that states if you had to turn around and sell your house tomorrow under duress, you might get 20% less than fair market value, right? The IRS gets that. So in other words, say my house is worth $500,000, right? And I apply the IRS and I owe $200,000 on it, right? So I have $300,000 in equity. Instead, I apply this IRS quick sale rule. So instead of valuing my house at 500, right, I apply the 20% rule, and I value my house at 400,000, right? So instead of showing $300,000 in equity, now I show $200,000 in equity, right? And that might not seem like much, but at a school like Syracuse or NYU, that I'm not exaggerating. That's $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 per year just by making that one simple switch, right? In terms of reducing your equity. That's how much it comes into play. It's just like any other asset, right? And so going back to the software, I told you I was going to kind of highlight the difference here in the SAIs. So looking up here, you can see there's the federal SAI. That's from the FAFSA. And again, all the FAFSA does is assign your family an SAI. So there's a federal SAI, right? FAFSA federal, little mnemonic device. Then the private schools, like I said, use this institutional methodology. It's just a different way to calculate the SAI. Again, one of the major differences is that these schools, NYU, Syracuse, out of these three, they use this methodology, right? And the reason that there's a spread here, 16 to 24, is because different schools treat home equity differently, right? So the lower you get this, reduce your equity, the lower this SAI is going to be, the better off you're going to be, right? So again, the less equity you show, the better off you're going to be from an SAI perspective. And moving the SAI, moving the equity down even $100,000 at Syracuse probably saves you $3,000, and NYU probably saves you close to $5,000, right? Also, you could do that with any other real estate that you own. If you own, a second property, investment property, a rental property, vacation home, they're not really concerned about the income that's generated on your tax return. It's all about equity, right? Any real estate, colleges are concerned about home equity. All right, so that was the asset portion of the section there, right? So that was all about assets. Now we come to income, right? Income. And the key part about income is black and white. It is what it is. There's not as many strategies to implement, especially class of 2023. As for the class, the easiest way to remember it is so the question is what tax year is going to be used, right? So you say, okay, my kid's class of 2025, subtract 2, they're going to use the 23 tax return, right? Sophomore families, junior families, class of 2026, subtract 2, they're going to use your 24 tax return. Class of 2027, subtract 2, they're going to use your 2025 tax return. You don't get a choice. For better or worse, you have to use that tax return. Again, if there's some mitigating circumstance, you lost a job, what have you, the tax returns are normally high. You do have an opportunity to go back and appeal, right? But you have to use the tax return that's required. You don't get a choice. What income line did they use? Ooh, jumped ahead. What income line did they use? Line 11. If you go to your tax return, it's AGI, your adjusted gross income. That's the income line that they use, right? And when I'm going to talk about any kind of incomes for state programs, that's it. It's the AGI, line 11. Students are afforded an income allowance, right? Don't confuse with assets. If you show $9,000 in assets, oh, there's an emoji. I'm not sure exactly what we're trying to communicate, but there you go. I like it anyway. Students are afforded an income allowance. If you show $9,000 in assets for a student, it will count against you, right? But in 2023, if this kid made less than $9,000, it won't hurt you at all, right? So be aware of that. This also applies for enrolled students. So I had a kid this past year, she went to NJIT, and they gave her, I'm kind of ballparking these numbers up, right? But let's say basically they gave her, she was paying room and board, right? So let's say they gave her $15,000. She's enrolled in college now, but in the tax year for 2022, she made like $17,000 on her taxes, right? Which obviously is well above this income allowance. They took $8,000 away from her in grant money at NJIT, right? So be aware of that. So she basically worked, made all that money, did a great job, but she exceeded the threshold so much they just took the grant money away, right? So, be aware of that, okay? Again, for high school students, usually not that applicable, but it might be. Also, as the kid goes into high school, goes into college, it may become, even more appropriate to be wary, be monitor, how much they're actually making. So obviously the answer is get a job off the books, right? No, but keep track, because you don't want to be working and just get less money, less grant money, less need-based aid. That what happened to this girl, right? So that's income, guys, right? I'm glad someone like that. That's income. All right. So primarily thus far, right? And Dan, anything we need to touch on, consider, and part of this is just me taking a sip of my delicious seltzer here.
Dude, you're doing a fantastic job. Keep it up. And I'm already up to 39 questions answered, if that tells you, and 35 still to go. So we're rocking and rolling.
All right, awesome, awesome. All right, so I really love the emojis are new. I never had the emoji before. I love them. All right, awesome. Okay, so guys, thus far, we've primarily talked about need-based financial aid. And again, right, unless you're, six, seven, eight, $900,000 income where I'm not getting any need-based financial aid, right? At least check out what your SAI is going to look like, right? Because again, if you're looking at schools like Columbia, your SAI could be upwards of $90,000 and you still receive some need-based aid, right? So again, the question becomes, what if I don't qualify for any need-based financial aid, right? Step number one is knowing that, is confirming that, right? So again, how do you do it? The easiest way, listen, you can run a net price calculator, but the MyCap tool is basically a net price calculator on steroids, right? And listen, I'm biased 100% without a doubt, but it's completely free and it'll give you the number. But you can run a net price calculator out of school as well, right? Every school is required by federal law to have them. They're not very accurate, quite frankly, but you could at least get an idea of what you're looking at. But number one, figure out your SAI, whatever resource you want to choose to do it. And again, confirm that, no, I'm not going to get any need-based financial aid. So we're saying now you have an SAI of, 6 figures, right? Over $100,000. If that is the case, you're not going to get any need-based financial aid, right? Then what? Just because you're not getting need-based financial aid does not mean you must pay $90,000 a year for college. You don't have to do that. But you don't get to, make that determination at every school, right? So if you have an SAI of $100,000, you apply to NYU or Columbia or Vanderbilt or Duke or Hopkins, you're paying sticker price. You're not getting a dime. Why? Because all those schools only or almost exclusively give need-based financial aid, right? So if you have a SAI of $100,000 and you're not looking to pay $90,000 a year, number one, understand the colleges on your list that you're going to apply to. How do they do business, right? Are they only need-based financial aid like the Ivies? Are they only need-based financial aid like the NESCACs, Bates, Middlebury, Bowdoin, Colby, right? The NESCAC schools. Are they almost exclusively need-based finance, or MIT, throw that, they don't give any merit, right? Are they like, Vanderbilt? Are they like Duke? Are they like Hopkins, where are they like NYU, where for all intents and purposes, are they like Notre Dame? And I'm not exaggerating. These schools give merit scholarships to 2 to 3% of their admitted students. That also includes athletes, right? So for all intents and purposes, there are no merit awards at these schools. So if you have a $100,000 SAI, you're paying sticker price, right? At all of these, at many of these private schools. So at least know that, right? And I'm not telling you don't apply, and I'm not telling you not to pay $90,000, but one, understand how it works, right? Look, all this is projectable. Like none of this is guesswork. We can figure out exactly how much all these schools are going to give you, right? So one, understand that, and then two, trust me on this, give yourself options, right? And just how your guidance counselors and your school communities do a great job encouraging kids to kind of make a school list, reach target safety from an admission perspective. You don't have to, but I strongly advise you do the same thing financially, right? Make sure that at different levels, you are applying to schools that will actually give you money, right? And again, that's going to be determined by, again, what the student's academics is, but also what are your finances, and then how does that particular school do business, right? So let me show you, let me give you this toggle here. So the last scenario I showed you for the Mulhern family here, right, Matt Jr., was the family had an SAI of, like whatever, 25, 30,000. But now, right, moving on up, Matt Jr.'s family has an SAI of between 83 and 100,000, right? And let me say this too, and having, like I said, done this for a long time, just because my family's SAI is $100,000, if most families in this position are not in actual real shape to pay $90,000 a year for college, right? Just because your SAI says that, the school expects you to pay 100, most families cannot do that. And quite frankly, most families should not do that in most cases. Obviously, there are exceptions. But again, at least understand that, right? Whether you think it's right, wrong, or different, at least understand it. So for this family, right, Columbia, NYU, they're not getting a dime, right? Because look where my SAI is, over 100,000, and Columbia, NYU only give need-based financial aid. So I'm not getting anything at those schools for this family. For Matt, the other family that I showed you, Columbia and NYU were great bargains, right? Great bargains, 25,000, 30,000, but not for this family, right? They're going to be 90,000, 100,000, right? Why is it different? Based on only one thing, the SAI, the only thing that matters at those schools, right? But again, that doesn't mean that you have to pay 100,000 at Columbia. It just means that that's what Columbia is going to expect you to pay. So what do I strongly advise you to do if you're in this scenario? Hedge your bets and give yourself options, right? And I point out University of South Carolina here because, and I know we're getting, I'm going to get you out of here soon, guys. And again, I'm doing this with a Met game on TV, so you can tell how invested I am here. But I'm going to give you a quick story. True story, happened about 3 years ago, I guess. I had a kid, family came to me. They said, Matt, we're new to the process, blah, blah, blah. So they chose to work with me. They had an SAI of $100,000. So we knew off the bat, they were not getting any need-based financial aid. It was not happening. They weren't getting it. But the kid had a dream of going to Brown, right? They were from Massachusetts family. The kid had a dream. That was his dream school, go to Brown. And by the way, just because I know I'm stereotyping here, happens a lot. Moms, I hear a lot about dream schools from moms. Oh, my kid works so hard. He can go to any school he wants. I understand that. You're perfectly entitled to that. And that was this family's initial kind of approach. But I said, hold on, right? Number one, Brown's going to cost you $90,000 a year. Let's understand that. I'm not telling you apply or don't apply, but that's the financial reality. That's what will happen. Even if you apply to Brown, which you ended up doing, let's give yourself some different options, right? Let's give yourself some other options. Let's hedge your bets to some degree. And so this kid was a business kid, right? And so long story short, he applied to a bunch of different schools, but he applied to University of South Carolina, right? University of South Carolina, for those unfamiliar, obviously SEC school, big public flagship university, excellent international business program, excellent honors program, right? So this kid gets down to it, and lo and behold, he gets into Brown. Gets into Brown, I don't know, what does Brown have? 8% admission rate, whatever the number is. Kid gets into Brown. But now they're staring down the barrel of $90,000 a year, right? Multiply that by 4. We figured out, based on the resources that they had, what they would have to borrow, we figured out they would pay $500,000 to go to Brown, send this kid to Brown. By the time they were done paying back loans and interest, it would cost $500,000, and the kid would have, 200, I forget the exact number, whatever, call it $200,000 in student loan debt, right? That he would be, carrying around at 6 and 7, 8, 10% interest. The kid got at the University of South Carolina, right? International business program, honors program, right? So now this kid's a stud academically, obviously, right? He's getting to Brown. Listen, no one is choosing University of South Carolina over Brown in a vacuum. No one, right? But guess what, guys? We're not in a vacuum. Brown was going to cost $500,000. University of South Carolina, this is basically the award the kid got. He was paying room and board, right? Essentially, it was less than $20,000 a year. The parents basically said, look, we got 20. We got you for 4 years, graduate debt-free, and in fact, we'll give you a down payment on a house for when you graduate, right? That's literally the conversation they had. So, it was either $500,000 for Brown, graduate debt-free, international business program, honors program, University of South Carolina, right? The kid's in his 3rd year at the University of South Carolina, doing incredibly well. They made a business decision, right? And again, no one is going to put South Carolina over Brown in a vacuum, but they weren't in a vacuum, right? So, and they said to the kid, listen, you want to go get an MBA? Go to Brown. That's going to cost you $80,000 no matter what, because there's no money for grad school. So save your bullets to some degree, right? So, again, if this family, would just say my dream school, it would have cost them $500,000. Listen, I'm not telling you that Brown's not worth $500,000. Maybe it is to some of you guys, right? But give yourself options, give yourself choices. You do not have to pay $90,000 a year. You don't have to, but you have to choose schools, or you have to apply to schools that are going to give your family money. Don't be blindsided in April when Brown sends you a bill for 90 grand. Don't be in that position, right? At least understand it, at least know it, right? And give yourself options. So that's kind of my story, or a story with, even though you're, not going to qualify for need-based financial aid, there's still a lot of strategy that goes into this process. and you can get your kid to a great school for a really good price, but again, you don't always get to choose the school, right? And again, how do you start understanding that? What's your SAI, right? Very, very important, for better or worse. All right, so that's, for families, again, and you could see if you go to the South Carolina and all of them have it, this kid, he's going to get a $44,000 merit award. Now he's a stud, right? This kid was a stud that got this. Don't get me wrong. It wasn't an average student, but he basically, at Brown, him being a stud academically got him into the school, but at South Carolina and schools that give merit, right? Because again, Brown doesn't give merit. He uses academics to get rewarded financially, right? Which you can't do at Brown. Again, why? Because they don't give merit scholarships, right? So again, kids' academics or kids' profile, family's finances, what schools are we talking about, right? How do they do business? Those are your three variables. All right, 15 minutes, guys. I'll have you out of here. For anyone, I know you're getting antsy. So hang with me. I'll get you through this. Coming down the stretch here. All right, the other type of school, right? So I kind of gave you, make sure you're applying to schools that will give merit scholarships, specifically for the families that have a high SAI, right? Also value schools, right? So your kid's not a stud. He's not going to get a full, merit scholarship in South Carolina. We sent a ton of kids. I have a ton of kids apply to James Madison in Virginia, right? So for a high-end family like this with this need-based profile, the SUNYs are going to cost between 30 and 35. Rutgers, just as a New Jersey proxy, is going to cost between 35 and 40, right? James Madison, out of state, maybe your kid wants to leave the area, right? Get out of the tri-state. James Madison, out of state, $45,000. It's going to be a little bit more, but it's within spitting distance of a SUNY or a Rutgers, right? And also, if you have an elite student like University of Maryland, if I was that kid, going back to the kid that was looking at Brown, you have a high achiever, right? Look at public school honors programs like the University of Maryland, right? So Maryland costs $60,000. Unless you have a 1,500 SAT score, there's $10,000 to $12,000 in merit aid on the table. Also an invitation to the honors program, right? So I had a kid last year go to Maryland for 50 grand as compared to Amherst College, right? A NESCAC school for 95,000, right? It's basically half the price. So again, 50,000 is still a ton of money, right? But literally is half of what Amherst College would have cost them. So again, no matter what situation you're in, there's always strategy to find a discount. But I can't stress this enough. Your school list is, to a very large degree, the determining factor of how much you actually pay for college. Right? So again, some highlights of merit-based aid. It comes from the admissions office, not financial aid. It's for 4 years, right? So Maryland would say, congratulations, we want to offer you 40 grand, $10,000 a year, maintain a certain GPA, whatever it is, 2.0, 3.0, 3.5, depending on that specific award. But again, every school's different. Some schools give merit, some schools don't. Some schools give a lot of merit, some schools give none. It is a school-specific process. Very family-specific, very school-specific. All right, source of aid, New York, New Jersey. So New Jersey, and that website is actually wrong, which I forgot to correct, but the website's useless, so don't worry about it. I didn't say that, but it's true. So it's HESAA.org, state of New Jersey, HESA. You can see the tag grant. So if you're a New Jersey resident, all you got to do is fill out the FAFSA and you get considered for all the programs, right? You can see the tag, the Garden State Guarantee, and it's only 2 years old, the Scarlet Guarantee at Rutgers, New Brunswick, 100 grand AGI. And again, that's that line 11. It's less than that. You're going to get a really good deal at Rutgers. The state of New York probably has the most popular or well-known state program, the Excelsior, right? They also have the TAP. Now, New York's different. You have to do the FAFSA. You have to do the TAP application as well. And then you have to do the third Excelsior application, right? So there's 3 separate things you need to do in order to qualify your family for the TAP or Excelsior. The Excelsior is 125 grand below. Again, that's that AGI number. That's that line 11. If you get that, you can see there's conditions. You got to stay in the state of New York. If you get, if you're below 80,000, you don't get the Excelsior. You actually get the TAP grant. The grant is better. There are no conditions, but they wind up being about the same amount of money, about $5,500, $6,000. Some schools will add on to the TAP grant an additional $1,500. But the Excelsior, you're not going for free. They basically cover $5,500 to $7,000 in tuition, right? You always got to pay room and board. All right, so I gave you the base, right? The knowledge, here's how it works. The second part, the strategy, hopefully you kind of, walked away with some good tips and tricks. Now is kind of, again, the nuts and bolts. And again, we're coming down the stretch, guys. How we doing on time? I got 15 minutes to take you home. I'm going to land this plane soft. Here we go. So, guys, I cannot stress this enough. Number one, there are no universal deadlines, right? Every school is a different deadline. Every school has a different deadline. Don't ask me. Don't ask Dan. Don't ask anyone. What's the FAFSA deadline? If you're asking that question, you're not understanding the process. Here's the question. What is the financial aid deadline for the schools I am applying to? Depending on how I am applying, right? ED, EA, regular. That's going to dictate your deadline, right? There's really no such thing as a FAFSA deadline, right? There is, but not really. It's in June. Don't worry about that. The deadlines you're actually interested in are coming up right now. There's no deadline at any school in the country before November 1st. So you got a month, literally, right? There is no such thing as first come, first serve. I know that's a perpetuated myth. I know, unfortunately, guidance counselors do it. And the thought process behind it is right. Don't wait to submit these apps, but you don't jump to the front of the line. Here's what happens. Most of these schools don't even look at your financial aid till after they go through the admissions process, right? So there's no such thing as first come, first serve. It does not exist, right? Despite people may tell you that, there's not. Trust me, there's not, right? For financial aid anyway. Every school has a deadline, right? That deadline exists for a reason, as long as you meet the deadline, right? So you're applying ED at whatever, UPenn or Columbia or NYU, you have a November 1st deadline. What now you have to, I'll talk about that in a second. You have to submit the CSS profile, whether you submit it today, October 1st, or you submit it November 1st, right? You met the deadline, you're good. Don't miss a deadline, right? Don't miss a deadline. But as long as you meet the deadline, you're 100% good. My general advice, every school you're definitely applying to, ideally submit your financial aid applications and your admissions applications for that matter in the month of October. If you do that, you cannot miss a deadline. One exception, UNC Chapel Hill has an admission deadline 10/15, but their financial aid deadline is not until March. But again, it's up to you to determine deadlines. There are no universal deadlines. Every school is different. There's also, what the requirements are. Is the school the FAFSA? Is the school the FAFSA and CSS? Is the school the FAFSA, the CSS, and Princeton has their own financial aid app, or UPenn, or Southern Cal, right? They have their own financial aid application. What the requirements are determined by the school. It's up to you as a student, as the applicant, as the family, to make sure every school receives what it needs, right? Now, I'm going to come back to the FAFSA. I'm going to talk about the CSS first. The CSS became available today, right? 10/1/24. You don't have to rush out and do it, right? You have a month to do it before you're up against any deadline, regardless of how you're applying. There's not a single CSS deadline in the country for schools. There's some private scholarship 10/15 deadlines. I know Northeastern, if you want to early read, they have a 10/20 deadline, but that's not a hard deadline, right? But long story short, there's no hard deadline in financial aid in the country before 10/1. I'm sorry, before 11/1, November 1st, right? Now, the CSS profile is accessible now. It's much more complex than the FAFSA. And here's kind of the inside baseball. At schools that require the CSS profile, the FAFSA really doesn't matter, honestly. It's kind of pro forma. Do you have to do it? Yes. The FAFSA is required by federal law at every school in the country, but the CSS is your moneymaker, right? So people say, well, I'm applying ED and the FAFSA is not going to be available to December. How do they know? Well, they're going to use the CSS profile, whether the FAFSA was available or not, to make the determination of how much money you're going to get, right? They use that institutional methodology here, okay? So the CSS profile, vitally important. You're applying to school that requires a CSS profile. How you complete the CSS profile is very, very important, right? I talked to a mom the other day. She said, yeah, I'm going to let my daughter complete the CSS. What schools are you applying to? NYU, Bowdoin, Amherst. Those schools, the sticker price are $90,000. There's literally tens of thousands of dollars at stake completing this application. Good luck to you, right? What can I say? Good luck. So it's very, very important, right? Going back. So the FAFSA, last year, it was always available October 1st. Before last year, the Department of Ed, I'll say in my commentary, they made some changes. Last year was available on January 1st. This year, they said it'll be available by December 1st. Whatever. It is what it is. When it becomes available, do it. There's the website for it. What you can do now is you can create your FSA IDs. You're going to need two. You're going to need a parent FSA ID and a student FSA ID. If the parents are married, it doesn't matter which parent does the FSA ID. If the parents are divorced, which I'll talk about in a second, you're only going to have the custodial parent do the FSA ID, right? But again, you could do this now. There's the website to do it. Divorce separated. Let me touch on that now. So again, there's a difference between the FAFSA and the CSS profile. So for the FAFSA, if you're in a divorce separated situation, the legality honestly doesn't matter in a divorce separated situation. As long as the parents, both biological parents, are maintaining separate households, you are, for financial aid purposes, in a divorce separated situation, right? You fall into the divorce separated bucket. If that is the case, when you go to do the FAFSA, only the custodial parent's financial information goes on the FAFSA, right? Only the custodial parent information. If mom is the custodial parent, right? Dad is non-custodial parent. Dad's information does not matter on the FAFSA, right? However, right? Always the however. However, the CSS profile, again, required by the NYUs, the Villanovas, the Drexels, the Syracuses, the private schools of the world. They're going to want the CSS profile with the custodial parents' information, right? But then they're going to require what they call the NCP, or non-custodial parent information, right? Non-custodial parent information. So these private schools are going to use, both the custodial parents' finances and the non-custodial parents' finances, right? So be aware of that. That's how it works in a divorce separated situation. Now, who's the custodian? Honestly, there's some ambiguity there. The rule used to be, right, which parent does the kid live with or spends the most time with? They changed the rule last year to the custodian is who provides the most financial support, right? Which honestly, that too is ambiguous, right? If mom, pays the bills and pays for, rec basketball and travel hockey and, lunch every day and dinner, but then dad pays the mortgage, right? Like non-custodial dad pays the mortgage. So there's some gray area there, quite honestly, in terms of who the custodial parent is. Honestly, I'll be honest with you, straight up, if you're in a divorce separated situation, from a financial aid perspective, you can take advantage of it. But you got to strategize correctly. If you are in that situation, strongly recommend a meeting with Dan or myself to go through the details, because you can really, straight up, you can take advantage of it if you do fall in that situation from a financial perspective. But that's how it works, right? So the FAFSA, custodial parent only, CSS profile, it's going to be the custodial parent and the non-custodial parent income and assets. Business owners, right? The CSS profile is complex. They ask you a lot about your business. How do you value your business? Gross revenues, gross receipts. Do you have a Schedule C? K1, your partnership, corporation, whatever. So the CSS dives deep into the kind of business owners. And also, like we talked about, home equity, right, becomes a significant factor with the CSS profile. Again, how you answer those questions matters. All right, guys, guess what? 2 more and we're out of here. Yeah, listen, I got 6 minutes and I told you at the beginning an hour 15. And believe it or not, even with the 3 or 4 story times I gave you, we're gonna be right on the button here. So here's what, and actually this slide was not in the presentation, right? But I actually pushed to get it in. Why? Because I didn't think the webinar was long enough. I said, we need to do more, right? I want this to be longer. No, because this is important, right? And here's why. In the wake of COVID, there's 2 long-lasting impacts. I didn't get any laugh emojis for that. Sad. All right. In the wake of COVID, there's 2 lasting impacts, right? There we go. Sometimes ask and ye shall receive. Number 1, test optional, right? Most schools are still test optional. Number 2, the ED acceptance rates. ED acceptance rates were always higher, but in the wake of COVID, they went through the roof, right? Let me give you a quick example just because I know the numbers to this school. So Vanderbilt, right? Down in Nashville, Vanderbilt, elite school. The ED admission rate last year at Vanderbilt was 24%. The ED2 admission rate at Vanderbilt was 17%. The regular admission rate at Vanderbilt was 4%. Right? So there's a 20% difference in admissions at Vanderbilt between ED1 and regular. Tulane, if you don't apply early decision or early action to Tulane, you're not getting in. It's a 4% regular admission rate, right? It's basically an Ivy League school regular admission. Why does this matter? Because a lot of families want to take advantage of the ED. in terms of the admissions, which makes sense. But one, either they don't, because they don't understand the finances and don't want to commit. On the other spectrum, they want to take advantage of the ED and don't care about the finances, which to me, guys, all this is predictable. We can show you, Dan, myself, we can show you, this is what you can expect at these schools, right? Use the ED to your advantage, while understanding what you're committing to financially, right? Don't do a blind. I think that's crazy. But also the other end of it is I'm not doing it because I don't want to commit because of the money. Well, we can show you that, right? It might be a great deal. It might be a great bargain, right? And you might want to say, all right, no, that makes sense. Let's use the ED to our advantage. So the financial aspect can and should, in my opinion, come into making the ED determination, but with the knowledge behind it, right? Not just random and say, all right, we want to take advantage of the admissions without understanding the finances. That's crazy to me. I know a lot of people do it, but you can still understand the finances. Right? All right, here we go. So last one. I'm going to give you this, then I'm going to go back to the appeal. Right. So what do you do now? Right. What do you do now? Nothing. You're good. You're done. No, look, guys, kind of keep the ball rolling here. Right. Hopefully, again, if we've done our job right tonight, me kind of on screen and Dan behind the scenes, hopefully, and I'm sure, answering your questions really well. Everyone here tonight and everyone that watches the recording has a much, much better understanding of how the process works. Right. Number two, how to kind of correctly position yourself. And then three, how to actually fill out the applications, right? So what do you do now? Use the resources available to you, right? Create a free MindCap account. And again, whatever, you don't want to use MindCap, don't. But go find the free resources. What do you want to make sure that you do? Understand your SAI. Can't stress how important. Understand your SAI, for better or worse. Then start to understand, how do the schools my kids interested in? How do they do business? What is my expectation at these schools that I'm actually applying to, right? And again, all this is projectable and predictable, right? So use the resources. Also, Dan, I saw he dropped in the comments here in the chat a link. Schedule with myself, schedule with Dan. Guys, this isn't really for, I need help with line 1, line 2. This is strategy, right? How do we best position ourselves? We're divorced, we're business owners, we have significant home equity. We're applying to $100,000 sticker price schools, right? These high level strategies. That being said, we'll talk to anyone. We want to help as many people as we can. But that, just kind of so we're on the same page, is kind of what the meetings are geared for. Also, too, just class of just because of the calendar. Again, we're happy to talk with anyone. But because of the calendar, obviously October 1st, we're gonna ask only class of 2025 for these. Feel free to use it in a month and a half for class of 26 or 27. But right now, just because of the time crunch of the calendar with deadlines a month away, we're going to ask for 2025. So take us up on it, right? We really appreciate you guys coming out tonight. We really appreciate, your guidance counselors, vice principals, assistant principals, having us come to the school. And like I said, is the start of it. If you did find some value here tonight, make sure you mention it to them. I'm going to come back to that 1 second. All right, so here's the last one, right? You can appeal, right? You can appeal. Now, listen, the appeal is not the end all be all. I feel like people get all geeked up to do an appeal, but the appeal is to try to squeeze a little bit more out. You want to navigate this process so you're getting the maximum on the initial offer, right? But then, like anything else, there's always an opportunity to go back and get more. You can and almost always should appeal your award, whether it's a merit scholarship, whether it's a need-based financial aid appeal. You have the opportunity to go back to these schools and ask for more. There's a better strategy than not to actually go back and implement it, depending on what school we're talking about, what the awards look like. Make sure that you have competing offers from other schools. Hey, Fairfield, right? Fairfield, you offered me $20,000, but Quinnipiac or St. Joe's, they offered me $25,000, right? These schools are competing with each other, so you want to make sure you have competing awards to go back to these different schools. So, or you had a job loss, you want to go back and appeal. So you should appeal. There's no downside to appeal. They don't rescind your admission. Don't be worried about that, mom. Again, that's usually a mom question. But you should appeal, right? And again, when do you do that? After your kid gets admitted, after you get your award, you can then go back and ask for more. The strategy will be dictated on, what the award looks like and really what school we're talking about, right? So again, what should you guys be doing now? You know, application season is underway here. CS's profile became available today. No first come, first serve. Make sure you take your time, you do it right. If you need help doing it, Dan and I are both available. Schedule a consult. We're happy to walk you through it and answer some questions, see if it makes sense to work together. But again, hopefully tonight, again, want to say thank you one more time to everyone coming out. Really appreciate your time. I hope the Mets are winning. I don't know, but hopefully they are. Once again, give a shout out to whoever it is at your school, your community for setting this up. Really appreciate it, guys. Hope you learned a lot. And yes, you will get an email tomorrow with the recording and class of 25 with the link to chat with Dan or I. I'm going to throw it over to Dan. He's going to take us home. Dan.
Hey, man. Thanks so much, Matt. Great job tonight. Folks, we hope that you got a bunch of information this evening. Again, the links have been in there if you need to schedule something with us. And most importantly, good luck as you jump in there for you families that are 2025 graduates. We wish you the best as you complete your CSS profile and the FAFSA. And if you get stuck, we're here to help you out.
Yeah, 100%. Yep. Wish the best of luck to everybody. Dan, great job with the Q&A. Everyone be well, be safe, take care, have a good night.
Good night, everybody.